Welcome back to the Political Marketing Podcast with me, Benedict Pringle. This is the podcast that seeks to understand how election candidates, political parties, and campaigning organisations win hearts, minds, and votes. Today, I'm joined by Declan Seachoy, Head of Social Media and Audience Growth at the TUC. That's the Trades Union Congress, which is the National Federation of Trade Unions in the UK. Before working at the TUC, Declan's previous experience included working at the campaigning organisation Momentum and also part of the Labour Party's digital team, where he helped deliver one of the biggest organic social campaigns in British political history. Welcome to the show, Declan.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So today we're going to talk about how you modernise a movement that can sometimes feel like it belongs to another era and what it takes to make collective action feel relevant in the digital age. So to sort of kick off that conversation, would you agree that amongst some audiences, unions have a brand problem?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the unions have been around for a very long time. And so I think for a lot of people, there's associations with, the 70s. And I think for a lot of people that there are a lot of negative perceptions. I think it's also true to say that there are different segments of people out there. It's not people out there have very different perceptions of the union movement. I think I think the research suggests that older people can often have a slightly more negative view, whereas the issue we face with younger audiences, our younger segments, is not so much a negative perspective, but a lack of awareness. So for us, the battle with them is trying to even make them aware of what we are and what we stand for, and therefore why they should join a movement.
So when you look at audience research, what do younger workers actually associate with the word union?
So for younger workers, one of the biggest problems is just them not even knowing what unions stand for or what unions do. And so I think for us, the most important thing we can do is to really emphasize that we are here to help you at work. And a lot of people feel like they might not need a union, or they feel like unions are only important when they have a big problem. It's not just like a general ongoing thing. But the thing that we're always trying to emphasize is that things can always be better. We're always trying to highlight, look at this group of workers just won a 15% pay rise, or they just won three days extra holiday at Christmas. So when we're trying to reach younger workers, always trying to make it relevant to their lives and also very tangible. I think there can be a tendency in campaigning world to make everything feel very grand and quite difficult to understand. And I think in the past, like, we have a rule in our social media team: people don't care and people don't know. And so you really have to make sure that they want to know about it and explain it in terms where they will feel like they get it. And so when we're sharing stories from our unions, our affiliated unions, we're always trying to identify what's the things which actually, because with the union movement, there's over 5 million members. There's different stories going across the whole movement all the time. Every day there's like a new dispute or a new campaign. It's our job at the TUC to highlight the ones which we think have the potential to really like ignite people's imagination and really get them going. We don't really tell people just to join a union. We like to share stories which, I think I probably something that you relate to in your job. People don't always like to be told what to do. We don't just say, "Oh, just join a union." We give them the knowledge and the excitement by finding really exciting stories. Whether it's sometimes there is a negative aspect to it. I'm not saying that there isn't. Sometimes it's workers fighting back against, a bad boss or a company which is, taking away their rights. But there can also be lots of positive stories which we like to share. We like to be able to show both ends of the spectrum, because, with social media, if you're somewhere in the middle, you're not really going to get engagement or get any reach.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because there's a huge amount of social content about working life, isn't it? And I guess that's totally unsurprising because it's a huge part of people's life. Like, there's, I think probably, I don't know, maybe 20% of content I see on TikTok is in some ways to do with people's jobs, either making funny memes about it, or, complaining about it, or whatever it might be. So it feels like a natural topic that people are already talking about. How easy is it to insert sort of discussions of unions into that context?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's something I often tell my team that I'm always seeing viral content about about work, and I'm like, this should be us. I used to work at the Labour Party. I really wanted one of my biggest aims coming to the TUC was to make the TUC more relevant to people's lives than the Labour Party. Everyone kind of has a view on what the Labour Party is doing. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of, Labour Party is a big organisation. People like to talk about it, discuss it. And there was a time when the TUC was the same. The BBC used to stream the annual Congress live on BBC, on TV, to millions of people on their platforms. It's now crucial, and this is an existential problem for the union movement. It's not declining very fast, but compared to our heyday, it is a falling issue. But as you say, there's also a massive opportunity here, which is that this is social media. Like, if you look at a lot of the biggest podcasts in the world, they're often about things which are very just very normal, like things that people do every day. So they are either about food, they're either about parenting, they're that kind of thing, which is just something which is not like a niche audience. And so
Yeah, and works the same, whether it's the Diary of the CEO or whatever. There's a huge amount of content out there about work.
100%. And one of the issues out there is that the people who don't quite share our values, or put it like that, are out there dominating. They're the ones who are kind of telling everyone, you need to hustle, you need to work really hard, which I'm not saying you don't have to work hard, but I think there's a slight focus on perspectives which are quite elite driven, whereas I think the space for the TUC is to bring in viewpoints from the ordinary worker, the ordinary perspective.
Yeah.
And so that's a really, really exciting possibility. And to us, we've benefited from that already. We've had countless. We're fortunate to work in an industry where it matters and people care about it. And so when we announce, for example, a new campaign to get a £15 minimum wage, that got 5 million organic views on Twitter. That's amazing, publicity for our movement.
It's engagement that sort of any brand would die for. So you're right. It's
Right.
definitely a subject which gets people sort of hot under the collar, or emotionally engaged. So I'm interested in, you must do a lot of message testing and that sort of thing. Presumably there is a view on, if you're speaking to a sort of 25-year-old Deliveroo rider, for example, about why joining a union matters. Is there any good evidence about the sorts of things that drive that sort of consideration?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we're constantly testing stuff to make sure that it's effective for our target groups. We've had a number of videos. We've had a new area of work targeting, for example, industrial workers. For this, one of the first starting points for all of this stuff is, and this is a basic principle across social media, is if you want to reach people. So if you want to reach people, you want or for people to see themselves in the video. So often we present videos with the workers themselves. And I think something I often discuss with my colleagues is the testing is important, but with social media and with the attention digital age that we live in, half the battle is actually getting it in front of people's screens in the first place. So, you can test something and have the most perfect message, which is going to shift people's minds. But we're not a movement which puts millions of pounds behind an ad so it's seen by lots of people. We rely on organic reach. So part of the equation is also coming up with a piece of content which gets seen. And so we do test stuff, and we do test different approaches, and we show stuff to people to make sure that it's not putting them off. And we're very sensitive to areas like sometimes I think there can be a perception that if a content is coming from the TUC, it's kind of inherently biased, which, we are the TUC, we do have values, and that sometimes can be some of the feedback we get. But at the same time, we've had videos which have organically reached 10 million people about, people working in hospitality. And then we have the tools to then reach them and try and bring them in to become union members.
Are there particular content themes or content formats that you've seen that are particularly good in this attention economy? Like, is there a piece of work that if you were to point to and you go, that was one where we really nailed it, what would it be?
Where to start? I mean, for social media, and this alludes to something I was talking about earlier, there often needs to be something that grabs the audience at the start. Often this can be some sort of humor, doing the unexpected. That's something that we often try to do. So, for example, we had a video working with our disabled workers at the conference. We have a disabled workers conference at the TUC. They wanted to do something about how difficult it is to travel because with the removing of the train guards, then, that there was basically lots of cuts to the transport sector from government, which meant that it was much harder for disabled people to get out and about. So your kind of typical way to highlight this would be a kind of like really serious, sad piece to camera about someone talking about the difficulties they're facing. So we did do that, but the piece of content which went the furthest was actually we flipped it on its head. And I got to shout out my colleague Paul here, because he's brilliant at doing these sorts of videos. Where our first thought is to think, okay, what would a campaigning organisation typically do? Can we flip it on its head? So with this one, we actually wrote a script where they were thanking the government because they wanted to thank the government because they don't want to see their family, they don't want to see their friends, they hate socializing. So all the cuts and all the issues with transport, all the delays, all the cancellations give us the perfect excuse to never go out. And that's always what I've always wanted to do. So, just like something,
That's nice.
a bit kind of like predictable once you've seen the first 15 seconds, but it's just something a bit kind of like different, a bit sarcastic almost.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's nice. And I'm interested, you worked for Momentum, which I'm sort of fascinated to hear about. And under Labour, under Corbyn, and in large part thanks to Momentum, there was a huge sort of energy and sort of sense of movement around the online activity. I mean, if you could try and explain, like, how was that sort of vibe fostered? And there's so many organisations, probably the TUC included, who, if they could get even half of that, they'd be delighted. I would be interested to sort of get a sense from you, if you've ever thought about it, like, what were the ingredients that led to the output having that sort of electric energy, which it did?
Yeah, I think with all of these things, there's an element of riding the wave and also creating the wave. You don't quite know to what extent you're riding it, to what extent you're creating it. But, at Momentum, for example, in the 2017 election, we were quite a small social media team. I think there was about 5 or 6 of us. And we created videos which 1 in 4 Facebook users in the country watched an entire Momentum video. And so a lot of it is a similar lessons that we've tried to apply to the TUC. And to be fair, we have grown massively the TUC social media reach, and some of our biggest videos have been even bigger than some of the biggest Momentum videos. But yes, you're right to say that it doesn't quite have the same. I think the digital landscape has changed to the extent that I think back then Corbyn and Momentum were like in the general elections of those days, they were like the only ones doing it. Whereas now, I think in the Boris Johnson 2019 election, they had two social media people on the kind of highest level of the strategy, and they were just constantly pumping out stuff. So now I think we have everyone's jumped onto it. Everyone's putting content out there.
Yeah. I mean, I saw today, there's a good point about the competition nowadays, that, Zach Polanski and the Green Party, his earned media share has just been absolutely enormous. So there's a report that came out today. The Green Party's airtime since he's been elected has gone up by 44%, whereas every other major party has gone down. Some parties buy down as 85%. And a huge amount of that is to do with their very strong social media game. And so, as you say, the TUC could have the best social media game in the world, but there's lots of other people who are doing an excellent job, and you can't get all the attention all the time. Yeah, it has changed. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the TUC is not, we're not going to be the most. I think the TUC, we've been around for a very long time. We want to be around for a very long time. We're not about the kind of like short term, quick burst. We're more about the gradual growth, the growing over years and years. But yeah, the landscape has definitely changed. But we do try to apply the same lessons from the core momentum years. And the other point I'd make is that it is quite shocking, even for me as someone, I've come from a world where, we were putting out quite provocative stuff. Now seeing, I don't know if you've seen like Gavin Newsom, the governor of
Yeah,
California.
yeah,
Some of the stuff he puts out is pretty out there and quite like,
yeah. It's edgy. Yeah,
it's edgy. And it's like, this is a guy rumored to be running to be the next president of America. And like, he's putting out stuff which probably at Momentum, we might have like 5 years ago been like, is this a bit too far? So everything's changed massively. But I think it's just so important now for organizations to take the right risks. People often refer to Ryanair's social media. I don't know if you've followed them.
yeah. It's
Very
sort
edgy.
of brutal, sort of rude to their customers and constantly
Yeah.
taking people down. Yeah.
I think people can take the wrong lessons from that. Like, you do have to take risks, but you also have to take the right risks, and they have to be calculated. And there has to be some sort of like logic and rationale behind it. It's not just about going viral.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's interesting. I mean, I find your history fascinating about how, you could argue that Jeremy Corbyn and the sort of the left of the Labour Party can be associated with sort of 70s and 80s, and similarly, the TUC and the trade union movement can be sort of seem almost nostalgic and from a different era. But what you seem to be able to do is bring it to life in a way that feels quite contemporary. I just wonder is that about the team that you build, or is that about the strategy that you adopt? Like, how much do you talk about that internally, about needing to constantly feel fresh and of the moment and not sort of slip back into, the great days back in the day?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we're kind of, as you say, constantly evaluating and constantly observing. I think part of it is also about, we work in a world where everyone is political. Everyone knows that the budget's coming up, and everyone knows that, everyone knows what was said on Radio 4 this morning and blah, blah, blah. And it's so important to be able to get the perspective of people who aren't political and people who aren't following every single thing that's happening. And so we test stuff, obviously, but we also spend a lot of time looking at comments, looking at reach, analyzing, seeing what's going viral elsewhere, making sure we're adopting all the latest trends. And, also just accepting that it fluctuates. There are times when, for the TC, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We want to be growing our audiences, and I often have a kind of octopus analogy, because there's obviously different platforms. So when I first joined, we were heavily reliant on Twitter, but to be only focusing on one platform is very dangerous. And to be fair, it's kind of proven to be quite true with Elon Musk and everything. Our reach on Twitter has declined a lot. But at the same time, my team has been brilliant at expanding our reach into other areas. So, for example, a lot of organizations have this view like, oh, Twitter's declining, maybe we should go more into Blue Sky. But for us, it kind of it's a bit too similar, and it's just like a much smaller audience on Blue Sky. Rather than putting energy into Blue Sky, we want to reach people where they are and where they're consuming stuff. So, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, they're the big areas. So we don't just want to be talking to people in the bubble. We want to be making sure that our content is reaching people out there in our target audiences, the people who are ultimately going to join unions and, keep our movement afloat.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I really do now. I used to be addicted to Twitter, and obviously I'm someone who is very interested in politics, but even I find I'm going on it less and less. So I think that's smart. Certainly, you always want to put your content where the audience is. I wonder if you get communities that build up on whether it's I mean, Facebook pages might sound very old school, but also within WhatsApp, like how much work goes into those sort of closed networks and trying to get in there? Is that something that you think about?
Something that we think about for sure. I mean, even Facebook, for example, we had a video. It's not as old school. It's not as over the hill as people might think. We had a video which got 4 million views the other day. One of our biggest videos of the last 6 months. So again, with that octopus analogy, we're just constantly just reaching people with all our different routes, whichever way we can. In terms of closed spaces, so I've noticed that a lot of organizations have set up WhatsApp broadcast groups. And that obviously makes sense because everyone's on WhatsApp. It's kind of like a natural evolution of where to go. So that's something that we are looking into. We also, what I've always wanted to do is just have the content that people share into these groups. You really know you're breaking through when you're getting people sharing links of your video, of your tweets into WhatsApp groups. And I often love it when a colleague comes up to me like, oh my God, one of your tweets was shared in my family WhatsApp group or whatever it is. That's when you're really breaking out the bubble. So yeah, it's definitely a really important thing to go for.
Yeah, it's so true. You always know when a issue has made it into like mainstream consciousness when it comes through on your like sort of on your lads exclamation mark WhatsApp group or your, as you say, your family WhatsApp group. When something hits there, you're like, oh my God, this is happening. This is in the real world now.
Totally.
Okay, so let's talk about politics and unions and sort of elections and unions. What's the? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm interested to hear from you. What role can and does the TUC play during elections from a sort of party political perspective?
Sure. The TUC its first thing to say, is not affiliated to any party. So, it's been around for a very long time. We have to be able to work with whichever government is in power. And we're subject to the same political funding rules as many other organizations. But obviously we do share values and a lot of history with the Labour Party. But it's also important to say that, the work we do is not just confined to short election campaigns. What we are always trying to do is make our issues, our campaigns, as high up the ranking of importance as possible. And that's during the election time and outside election periods as well. But obviously, elections are times when people, social media stats tend to spike. People are online, people are debating stuff. So it's a really good opportunity to mainstream our issues, get them talked about. And, obviously we like to have a bit of fun as well. So I don't know if we put this Rishi Sunak tweet, which on our calculations was the biggest tweet the day the general election was called. Basically, it was raining and there was pictures of him in the rain. And we just said like, oh, if you're being forced to work in the rain, you should join a union. It's not the funniest thing in the world, but it seemed to kind of like connect with people. It went really far. I think it got 2 million views on our Twitter. It was showed on Peston that evening. First time one of my social media posts has been shown on TV.
Get in
Which is
there.
a nice moment. So we like to use it as an opportunity, not to necessarily campaign for any political party, but to push our issues up the agenda as much as possible.
Yeah. And there's quite a lot of chatter out there at the moment about how, lots of people who might be affiliated with the trade union movement, who might be economically quite left wing, but potentially culturally, more towards the right side. And that's exactly the sort of audience that Reform UK are seemingly doing quite well with. I just wondered if do you feel that in the trade union movement? I mean, you recently had your trade union congress. Was there a big Reform presence there?
Not sure if there was a big Reform presence, but yeah, it's definitely something we're alive to. And the TUC in terms of the comms department, because I'm not. So in terms of the comms department at the TUC, we're never going to attack our members or talk down on our members or criticize our members. We are one big union family. I think for us, our strategy has been one of persuasion. We want to stay true to our values and make sure that we're promoting our values as much as possible. And it's also about holding politicians to account. we had a video, for example, where we did a Vox Pops video where we went to Clacton, Nigel Farage's seat, and we asked people about their views on issues like banning 0 hours contracts. Do you think companies should be allowed to sack loads of people, fire and rehire, sack loads of people and hire them on lower contracts? Obviously, everyone was saying no. And then we revealed to them, and crucially, not in a way which was like laughing at them or criticizing them, nor just like letting them know, oh, by the way, do you also know that your MP, Nigel Farage, actually voted against these measures? So we said there's a bill going through Parliament at the moment. Labour are pushing this bill to stop all these measures, to stop companies being able to fire and rehire you or to ban 0 hours contracts. But your MP is actually voting against it. And so that video did really well, got 2 million views, was covered in The Guardian. That's an example of how we're approaching this. We're not criticizing people for their view or the perspective. We're not criticizing them for wanting things to change. We recognize and share a lot of anger and frustration at, the way there's been lack of funding over 14 years of Conservative rule, that kind of thing. But we also just want to make sure that people are informed and people are aware of the potential threat from a reform government to issues, to workers' rights, which affect lots and lots of people.
Yeah,
We try to play it quite straight, basically.
yeah, and I think that's really interesting because people often talk about message carrier being as important as message in elections and in politics. And in a world where Reform UK are for sure going to be right in the mixer at the next general election, I'm sure the left and even the centre are going to be looking around for message carriers who can speak to working class men in particular about the issues that relate to them. And if that group of people are leaning reform, having a really authentic message carrier which explains that actually, some of the policies that reform might be pushing are actually not in the interests of working class people. I've got a feeling that, the trade union movement could be a really powerful player in the years to come, more so than potentially it's been for a while.
That's our aim. And I think, our social media channels are gonna be a big part of that. We've already had videos fronting workers. Like we had a video with a EV, electric vehicles worker, and he was basically just asking Nigel Farage, why are you coming for my job? Nigel Farage is basically, there's clips of him telling people to not bother don't buy electric vehicles. And he's like, mate, I work in this industry. We make cars. We're a British factory. These jobs are important, and this is a threat to our jobs and our livelihoods. So yeah, I think I agree. I think the TUC and the trade union movement across all our different members, we're really well placed to do that. And I think it speaks to that issue. I think we've talked about this in the past about like credibility. We are the workers. We are the people in these industries who are also going to face the negative effects of a potential reform government. So it's really important that we raise our voice and we put the members front and center, because I think, as you say, they are really, really important messenger carriages. It's just the truth. It's just we're striking at the truthful heart of it all.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so final question. Imagine that I'm about to do a startup trade union. I like that idea, actually. I think that'd be interesting. Yeah, let's do it. What advice would you give to me about, trying to recruit the next generation of progressives? What is the lesson that you've learned about building that sort of movement, particularly online, that I might carry into my trade union startup?
Very good question, and a very important question, because it's one that, even if you weren't starting, unions have been around for a long time. We're very aware of the need to target younger workers. So even for unions who've been around for a very long time, this is a question that we're all asking ourselves. I think it's important to meet people where they are rather than where you want them to be. So, for example, I think we have to recognize that people, when they go on social media, they're not necessarily looking to find out what the trade union is saying. They're looking for videos of cats. They're looking for football videos, Love Island stuff. We have to meet people where they are and really try and fight for their attention. Millions of videos are getting uploaded onto TikTok and YouTube every single second. So in order to get their attention, it's so important to, find ways to do things differently and grab and get onto their timeline and make sure that they don't flick away. And I think kind of connected to that is just really focusing on that journey that people go on from initially seeing a union video to then thinking about, oh, maybe I should join, and then going onto a union page or signing a petition or whatever it is. And I think for us, it's just about making that journey as seamless as possible and as kind of exciting as possible. You know, a big part of my strategy moving to the trade union movement, and because it touches on what we talked about earlier, is like celebrating our wins and reminding people what we're here for. You know, it's so amazing when uh, a change in the law happens that helps pregnant women get more time off to look after their kids. That's something that we've been campaigning on for years. That will help like millions of people, or like banning 0-hour contracts. So, you know, a worker doesn't find out at 10 o'clock on a Sunday evening that they're not going to work the next day and they're not going to be paid. These are really amazing things. So just reminding people that we're a really exciting movement that's fighting for change, that is going to be the forefront of things getting better in this area of your life, which is so important. We spend so many hours of our lives doing this thing. So I think that would be my focus, like focusing on that journey and making it just feel as exciting and energizing as possible. Because again, that's the truth. That's the core of the matter.
Declan, thanks so much for that and for joining me today. I think I find your story really interesting, and your journey sort of from Momentum to Labour to the TUC, always throughout all of that, making collective action feel like a modern, exciting idea, as you say, and I'm fascinated to see what you do next, and the next organisation that you sort of take into the modern era. It's been a real pleasure hearing how you think about that challenge. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here.